Hey, I've got this really nice video for you guys today. I did a collaboration with the chess YouTube channel called Chess Vibes, which is run by this great guy named Nelson. So he gave me a chess lesson, which is what you're about to see. And then I taught him a trick to solve a certain number puzzle, which is posted on his channel. So make sure to check that out after you've watched this video.
So before we start, I know we kind of talked earlier, but let's just recap for everybody watching. You've mostly just done some puzzles and
Yeah,
played
that's
against
right.
the
So
computer.
I've played against my kid,
Okay.
who's 10, and I've done like 25 puzzles a day for a week.
Okay. Gotcha. And you said you're around like 1100 puzzle rating right now.
That's what the puzzle thing says.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
I don't take much stake in that though.
Okay. Okay. Well, yeah, I'll just start by kind of telling you some basic principles and we'll go from there. So,
Yeah, that's perfect.
yeah, one of the things so first of all, there's three phases to a chess game. You've got the opening phase where everybody's kind of trying to get their pieces out. And so you've got the knights and the bishops on the back rank. And there's a lot of maneuvering to kind of figure out where your pieces are going to go. And once those are developed, you kind of enter the middle game. And that's really where a lot of games are won and lost, and where a lot of mistakes happen. And then after like some pieces get traded, you can get to the end game where there's very few pieces left on the board. And so each of those phases kind of have different characteristics to them.
So I feel like when I do the puzzles that's probably mostly middle and end game situations, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Most of the time it's going to be middle game. And then, yeah, like you said, a few end game ones. Yep, exactly. So at the start of the game, in the opening phase, there's three things that are really important to understand. Number one is that you want to try to control the center of the board if possible. And the reason for that is, for example, my knight over here on G1 can go to 3 places. But as soon as I kind of centralize it, well, now it can go to 8 places. And so your pieces can go to more squares if they're in the center than if they're on the edge or if they're in the corner. And so a lot of the time, the opening phase is about fighting for control of the center. So ideally, if your opponent lets you, if you can get 2 pawns in the center, this is a great way to start the game because you're already kind of controlling all these central squares.
Right.
So a lot of openings that you'll see, black won't do something like this. They'll immediately put a pawn in the center as well to kind of counteract what you're trying to do with getting 2 pawns. And the same thing could happen if you play d4. Black could play, queen pawn and again try to prevent you from doing that.
Right.
So, okay, so we're trying to fight for the center. The second part in the opening phase is you want to be developing your pieces. And when we say developing pieces, we're talking specifically about the knights and the bishops. And you want to get them off the back rank as quickly as you can because these are some of your more powerful pieces. A lot of people, when they first start chess, they kind of will make a bunch of pawn moves. And you'll see games that kind of look like this, right? Where people are just moving pawns. And
yeah, nothing's really happening.
Yeah, nothing's really happening. And your pawns can't do a lot by themselves. You really want to get these pieces involved as soon as possible. So that's kind of the second part. So control the center and then develop your pieces.
Okay.
And specifically the knights and bishops, usually you don't want to bring the queen out too early because the queen is one of the most valuable pieces. And if your queen is out
and the
early,
rooks are kind of hard to get out.
Yeah, the rooks are hard to get out. They're good, but they're also better in the end of the game. And a lot of it has to do with, are you familiar with the value of the pieces, like the point value of each piece?
I know that there is a point value. I know that the rooks are right below the queen, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In point value. I don't know which one is better, the bishop or the knight.
Okay, yeah. So queen is 9 points. Rooks are 5. And then the knights and bishops are considered to be equal most of the time. So 3 and 3. Although, generally speaking, you can make an argument that bishops are slightly better than knights. But they do have to be in like an open position for that to work. So like, for example, if all the pawns are kind of just stuck like this, it's really hard for a bishop to do anything because all the pawns are kind of blocking. Whereas the knights can still jump around to different places real easily.
And they're safe, yeah.
Yeah, so in that scenario would be one example where knights are probably slightly better. But generally speaking, in most normal positions, the bishops are a little bit better. So yeah, but going back to what I was saying about bringing out the queen early, some people will do things like this. and they're trying to get like a quick checkmate, like
Sure.
like this. But the problem is then your queen can start getting attacked, right? And if you keep moving your queen around, it can keep getting attacked, and you're just wasting time moving your queen around.
Yeah.
So
you're doing too much defense.
yeah. So control the center, develop your pieces, and then the third thing in the opening is usually you want to castle before move 10. And castling, generally speaking, does two things. So let's just go through an example game here for a second. I'll just bring these pieces out. And first of all, as soon as I castle, if you're moving your center pawns and you're leaving your side pawns, you get this nice little wall of pawns, and it kind of defends your king.
Right.
So that's a good place for your king to be on the side of the board. And then also it helps to connect your rooks eventually. So after you get the rest of your pieces out, something like this, this is called connecting your rooks. And that's usually a good thing because now your rooks are helping each other, and they kind of have the option to go to wherever you need them to. Depending on what happens the rest of the game, they can be positioned in the right place.
Right. I've noticed in the puzzles, like often I get the rooks to control columns or rows that are right next to each other.
Right. Yep. Yeah, so rooks are very powerful if they're together. So that's kind of the basic of the basics of the opening phase. There's those three things that you really want to try to do. You know, if you can do that better than your opponent, you're going to probably have an advantage going into the middle game. So does that make sense? Any questions on the opening phase before we jump to that kind of a middle game?
Okay, so if your goal is to castle like within the first 10 moves, like you said, does that mean when you start developing your bishop and your knight, you want to get the bishop and the knight on one side out first? So you want to do that kind of asymmetrically, like move bishop and knight from one side before you move the other?
Yeah, that's a good idea, and you will see that a lot of times depending on which pawn you move forward. Like in this case, we move the king pawn, so it's real easy to get the king bishop out, the king knight, and castle.
Right.
You know, when I say before move 10, it's kind of just a general rule. Like you don't necessarily have to rush as fast as possible. The main point is that you don't want your king to be stuck in the center and the center to get opened and a long range piece like a rook or a queen line up on your king. So for example, like if I were to castle and let's say black doesn't follow that rule and I play like d4 and let's say he captures and then we bring the rook here and let's say black plays d6, I play e5. And I don't know, black does something like this. Is a nightmare for black because now first of all, I'm just winning the knight for free. But the big problem is this rook is now lined up on the king. So that's what you're trying to avoid. And so you kind of have to just see how the game is going. And if it looks like the center is going to be opened up, like in this case, it was opening pretty quick, black should have said, you know what, I gotta castle right away. I gotta do this and castle.
Right.
But sometimes some games, you know, you have more time or you don't have to rush necessarily. But what you said is a good idea, like getting both pieces out and castling. So yeah, you said you played normally like this bishop and this knight.
So I would generally play this. I think I would play the bishop like you did, or maybe I would even take the bishop one higher.
Okay, bishop g5 and then
and then knight
f3.
Yeah,
and I mean, there's nothing wrong with this because there's no rush to get castled immediately because the center is still kind of closed up, right? There's no open files on your king. So that's totally fine as long as you don't waste moves.
This puts the bishop further from the center, but for some reason I like the pressure that it would have put on this knight.
Yeah, and that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There's different ways to approach it. You know, depending on what your plan is, you might want to attack this pawn. Like sometimes you can bring this knight out, use the bishop, and go for a fork here. But then other times, you know, this is very valuable to create a pin on the knight. So yeah, there's lots of ways.
Think that I don't think of it that deeply though. I think that's my problem. I just think like
sure. Yeah, no, and I mean that's totally fine when you're starting. So
yeah.
Okay, so let's say we go through I'm just gonna make some moves here. We go through the opening phase and we end up in a middle game. Let me just get to some kind of random position here. Let's do this and we'll put my queen here. Okay, so maybe we go like this and we get this position and it's like, okay, at this point is when we kind of transition from the opening to the middle game. So both players have done a pretty good job of fighting for the center. We've got a little bit of tension here. everybody's kind of developed their pieces nicely and castled. And now you kind of have to figure out what to do next. And so I would say there's two major things that happen in chess games once you get to this point. And most people tend to think a lot about the first one. So the first one is coming up with some sort of strategic long-term plan. So, maybe it's like, well, I'm going to start launching my pawns on the queen side and see what I can do over here. That could be, your plan. Or maybe it's like, no, I'm going to go for checkmate. I'm going to maneuver my pieces around on the king side somehow and bring my queen over here at some point and go for checkmate on the king. That could be a plan. The other part of the middle game is, you probably noticed this from doing all your tactics puzzles, but like there are ways where you can just win material. You can win pieces, what we call it. So like if you if you can trade a pawn for a bishop, that's a good trade for you, right? You're giving up one pawn and you're getting 3 points for it. So that kind of stuff really plays a bigger role, especially when you're kind of just starting. That is more important than like the long-term plans a lot of the time, because the long-term plan only works if you're not making mistakes along the way. And what a lot of people will do is they make these little mistakes and it just kind of messes them up. So like, for example, let's say I'm white and I'm like, all right, I'm going to trade this knight off and I'm going to bring my knight over here to try to bring my queen over and go for checkmate over here.
Right.
Not a bad plan. Yeah. But if I don't notice the fact that the knight can just take my queen, the whole plan is busted, right? So those kind of mistakes and blunders, we call them, are more important than those long-term plans a lot of the time. So, but yeah, doing tactical puzzles is
your first goal is not long-term planning, but just like not making mistakes.
Exactly. And once you get a handle on not making mistakes, that's when those long-term plans start to become more valuable to you.
Sure.
Once you get past the middle game phase, so pieces start getting traded off. So let me just kind of do some random captures here, just to like do this, and then I don't know, we'll say this happens and we get a trade, and this is not really a good position for black, but I'm just going to trade some pieces off here. And you get to something like this where now you're starting to get into the end game. And at the end of the game, there's a couple of things. Have you looked at any checkmates where you checkmate with like just a king and a queen against a king, or just a king and a rook against a king?
Yes.
Did you know how to do those already?
I don't know. Like, whenever a puzzle gives me those, I can generally solve it, but I don't know that I have a plan in my mind unless I see the situation.
Okay. So yeah, like if you get down to, a lot of times what happens is, if you have a pretty even game, you'll get down, you'll trade off all the pieces, and maybe one person has like an extra pawn, and they start pushing that pawn, and eventually that pawn becomes a queen. And if that's the only piece left, you've got a queen and you've got your king, and you have to figure out, okay, how do I get checkmate against the king? So it's useful to know those checkmates, like how to do, what's the technique, basically.
Kind of grindy checkmates, right?
Yeah, basically.
They're not like super flashy or fun, but you just have to grind it out.
Right. There's there's a technique that you can follow, and like for the queen, you just make a box and you just keep making the box smaller and smaller, and eventually you push the king to the edge of the board somewhere, and then you can use your king.
Like one of the corners, probably, right?
It could be the corner, or it could even just be on the edge. It doesn't have to necessarily be in a corner.
Okay. Yeah.
So, any questions on what we've kind of covered so far?
No.
Okay. Do you want to like just try playing a game, and I can just kind of give you some tips as you play the game?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. So now, this knight doesn't really have a great place to move, right? We should talk our way through this. It's going to be boring if I just like make terrible moves the whole time. Yeah.
Right.
So none of these moves are like super optimal for the knights. Oh yeah. What if bishop b4?
Bishop b4. Yeah, that would be a perfectly fine move. And you're actually creating a pin. It's called a pin on my knight because my knight can't move or I'd be in check, right? So that's a good move.
Oh, right.
And then you actually have a threat. If you want to go ahead and play that, that's fine. Yeah. And Do you see the threat that you have with your pawn if I don't stop it? Like, let's just say hypothetically you had an extra move right now. What could you play that would be a strong move?
Oh, pawn to d4.
Yeah, exactly. Because the knight's pinned, and then if you attack it with the pawn, you're basically going to win the knight. Exactly. So what I'm going to do is probably just take that pawn because I don't want to allow that to happen. So I'll just take it.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of see how, just throwing your pawns out there in the center it's not quite that easy, because if I can just capture them, I'm the one who ends up getting control of the center. So that's something to kind of watch out for.
So now I feel like, I've hosed myself so much that I wouldn't get the queen involved because we would just trade queens. No, I would take that, and then you would take. Yeah. And so I wouldn't want to get the queen involved right now.
Right. You would actually just lose your queen, because after I recaptured, you wouldn't have any way to take it back. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, going back to what we talked about, you can't really control the center too much at the moment, but you can finish developing. And so you want to ask yourself, which pieces still need to be developed, and try to find a place for them to go.
So the knights.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Maybe to threaten those pawns in the middle.
Exactly. Yep. So there's two moves that come to mind that I'm thinking of that you could do.
So maybe the kingside knight to put the king in place for castling.
Exactly. That would be fine. And also the other knight would have worked as well. But yeah, I think that's totally fine. And so I'm going to go ahead and just, actually, I have a nice move here. Queen a4, I'll do this. And this is creating a fork on your king and bishop.
Okay, so...
Yeah, so...
That's all I can do.
King f8. Let's do a take back. And actually, there's actually multiple ways when you're in check. You can move the king.
Oh, yeah, I could block.
Or you could block. And so blocking is probably better. Let me see. I think we can propose a take back if you want to do a take back.
Oh, yeah.
And actually, I want to go back. Before your knight move there, let's go back one more move.
Yeah.
I want to show you something.
The other knight move might be better because I can take the pawn without being threatened by your knight.
Right. So yeah, go ahead and accept that take back. When I take here, one of the things, you always want to be on the lookout for checks, right? Because checks are pretty dangerous because it forces you to do something about your king. So from what I just played that the check that I have is queen to a4, right? Mm-hmm. And the other thing that move does is attacks your bishop on b4. Mm-hmm. So that's a really dangerous fork. And so knowing that information, instead of playing the knight to e7, the other knight would probably be a better choice because it blocks off that check right away.
Right.
And so, you had said earlier about like trying to castle as soon as possible. That's a good idea, but like in this case, here's an example of where it's better to just do the other knight first, to take care of that check, and then next move you can play your knight to e7. So yeah, that's a good move. I'm just going to go ahead and develop my other knight.
So I feel like moving pawn to b5. It feels good because then that blocks, that like really puts pressure on this queen not doing the move that you did before.
So but
it's a pawn move.
You are correct. It does stop the queen move. The only thing I would say is we've already kind of prevented that threat by putting your knight on d7. And now I think it's probably just time to finish your development. And also that pawn on b5, the pawn on b5 is now actually going to be a target for my knight. So that's seems a bit risky. Now the knight's pinned right at the moment, so I can't take it immediately, but that's going to be a problem you're going to have in the future. So I think, just your knight to e7 move like you did before, just to get ready to castle, is probably a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
Yep. And I'm going to just push my pawn up. I just want to get my bishop out. And by the way, you can't castle if you're in check. So like that earlier example when the queen was putting your king in check.
Oh, that's yeah. Okay, I understand. Yeah, I thought that I should have been able to then, but it wasn't giving me the choice to move it over to. That's what I was confused about.
That's a common thing. A lot of people don't know. You can't castle if you're in check. Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna play bishop d3. And by the way, a good habit is to, like, whenever your opponent makes a move, you want to ask yourself, like, okay, why did they make that move? Are they like threatening something by doing
like,
that?
What's the plan?
Right.
So you're threatening. Well, I mean, you're threatening my bishop, but then, I mean, if you took that, I would take it with my knight.
Right. Exactly.
And then I don't want to take your bishop because it's protected by the queen.
Yeah, so I mean, either way, it's probably just going to result in a trade of those bishops.
Right. So those feel kind of static right now, for the time being, at least. I can't really take your pawns because they're both protected by the knights.
Right. The pawn on d5, you could take it with your knight because my knight is still pinned by your bishop.
Oh, right.
But there's a little tactic if you do that where... Actually, it's kind of a tricky position because if you take that, then the bishop on f5 that we talked about is now undefended. So I could probably take your bishop for free. But then you would have a nice follow-up move on my knight on c3. So it looks like an interesting line. If you want to play knight takes d5, you know, we could see how that turns out. That's not a bad idea, but it is a tricky position.
Because anything else would be trying to get... Well, let's see.
Yeah, I mean,
the two knight moves are not very interesting.
Yeah, knight takes d5 is the only one that I would consider because of the bishop on b4 is pinning my knight on c3. But other than that, you probably would have to do something with your rook, maybe rook to e8, or something like... Yeah, it's a tough position because whenever... I have those two pawns, which are really kind of preventing you from doing something. So it's hard to find it. It's hard to find a good move for black in this position.
What about just pushing a pawn up?
Yeah, you could push a pawn, maybe like c6. You could try knight to c5 is an idea to attack that bishop on d3 would be something, and also kind of opens up your queen on the d5 pawn.
Oh, knight to c5. Oh, yeah. Let's do that.
Yeah, so that's kind of going to force me to make a decision about that bishop on d3, because if I just castle or something, you're just going to get a free piece. So I will go ahead and I guess just trade it off so that I don't lose it.
And then I take it with the knight.
Right.
Obviously.
And so I think now's the time for me to castle. I want to get out of the center before something happens there.
And now,
yeah. So a lot of times
none of the knight moves.
Yeah, go ahead.
None of the knight moves are really great.
Yeah,
they don't seem to really put me into any more advantageous position.
Right. So one of the things you want to do is ask yourself which of your pieces are doing a good job, that are pretty active right now, and which of your pieces are not really doing anything. And you can probably find a couple pieces that aren't doing anything right now. Like maybe the rook on f8 or the rook on a8. I would try to figure out a way to get them more involved in the position. Yeah.
How would I get the a8 rook out?
Yeah, that's a good question. But if you can figure out a way to do that, that would probably help you. So my thinking is maybe something.
I guess I could move queen up one.
Exactly. Either queen
and then
d7.
Move the rooks right next to each other.
Exactly. Yes. So you could already play rook e8 if you wanted. Or you could move your queen somewhere, queen d7 or queen e7, and then you can slide that other rook over. And so, one of the things about rooks is if the pawn is blocking it, it's not really going to do anything. So you want to be looking for the files where there's no pawns of your color, which in this case would be the D and the E files. And that's where your rooks can actually, be effective in the game.
So if I moved queen to d7, I would want to move that to d8 or e8. So a8 rook.
Yeah, you would probably want the a8 rook to go to d8 because you want to leave the e8 square for the other rook. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of stuck.
Got it. You don't want, yeah, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'll do that.
Yeah, that's a good move. And so I think what I'm going to do is take away this bishop over here because it's just kind of sitting there. So I'm going to try to chase it away. And so you kind of have an important decision here, and one move is not good. So I don't know if you can kind of figure out which one would be the bad move in this case.
So it feels like I just need to retreat it.
Okay.
To A5.
Right? That's kind of the natural reaction. And that would be making a mistake. Because then I could follow up with my pawn, my pawn to B4, and you'd have a fork. You'd be in a fork. The pawn would be forking your bishop and your knight at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, you kind of have to just take the knight and go for the trade. Otherwise, you're going to end up losing it just for a pawn.
Oh, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess I see it's going to totally get stuck down here.
Well, and it's not so much that it's going to get stuck. It's that after you play bishop A5, if you want to go ahead and play it, we can just do a take back. I'll just show you just so you can visualize it better. So go ahead. Yeah. So as soon as I play B4, the problem is not that your bishop's stuck, but that I'm attacking the bishop and the knight at the same time. So you can save one of them, but you can't save both of them.
And I'm going to lose them to a pawn.
Exactly. And so we'll do a take back and one more take back. And so the other option that you have is to give up your bishop for the knight, and that's an even trade 3 for 3 as opposed to 3 for 1. Pawns are only 1.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, so that's a good move, and then I'll just take it.
And that decreases the amount of stuff that's guarding over here anyway for you in the
right. Like my knight's no
queen
longer.
side.
Yeah.
Oh, and also it means I can move this queen up to take this pawn. Oh no, never mind.
Yeah, it's still guarded by my queen.
Yeah, no.
But you can set that up for next move by getting one of your rooks involved.
Oh yeah, by moving A8 rook to D8.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
With that would be the move, right?
Yeah, that looks like a solid move to me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And so you're immediately creating that threat, and normally I would want to play like E4 to protect it, but your knight's covering E4, so
right.
I think probably I just have to play like C4 is the way to go. I'll play C4.
Yeah. So now, if I take queen to A4, so that threatens your queen and it's protected by the knight.
Yep. That's okay. The general rule is you don't want to trade too many pieces if you're down material. So, if you count up everything, we both have a queen, we both have 2 rooks, we both have 2 pieces, a knight and a bishop against a knight and a knight. And then you have 6 pawns, and I have 3, 6, I have 8 pawns.
Right.
So I'm ahead a little bit. And so if you were to trade off everything on the board, except, the 2 pawns, I'd have 2 extra pawns, right? So generally you don't want to offer trades like that unless you're ahead. If you were ahead, then yeah, trading is good.
Yeah.
So I would.
And you think that would instigate a trade?
Well, you're giving me the option to trade if you play Queen A4, because I could just take it and then you have to take me, and we just traded queens.
Okay, yeah. So the question isn't. I understand.
So I would go back to which piece is not doing anything, and you pretty much have 4 out of 5 of your pieces.
This knight C5 could threaten your rook pretty easily.
You could, but then my queen would take it. So that's kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, how it's a good plan, but it doesn't actually work because of the mistake of just losing the knight. So I think that rook on F8 is still not really doing anything, and so I think something like
just moving it to here, it's not going very far.
Yeah, but the rook.
I'm sorry, I'm a simpleton.
No, yeah, it's funny because rooks, even just 1 square over, can make a huge difference for rook.
I guess it does open up a huge amount of possibilities.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, rook E8's a good move because now my knight on F3 is kind of stuck guarding my pawn on E5 because your rook is there.
Right.
So that's a good move. I'm going to make a bad move, and I'll see if you can figure out why it's a bad move, and I'll just play that. So
so I could take this pawn with my c5.
Exactly.
And there's no cost for me at all.
Well, you know, that's something you would have to look, but as long as none of my other pieces can take it, then yeah, you're just getting a free pawn. And so that was why.
And it puts this knight into better position.
Right in the center of the board. Yeah. Exactly.
I understand now, yeah. And not only in the center of the board, but like it's flanking up towards your king side.
Yeah, potentially. Now, I mean, you're going to need probably more than just.
I mean, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot.
But yes,
to be done before it's more open up there. But yeah.
Yes, exactly. So yeah,
okay.
You know, whenever something's attacked, that remember there's multiple options. You could move it, but you can also take the piece that's attacking it, or in some cases you can even do like a counterattack, and that can also be a good option. So yeah, I mean, if you want, you can go ahead and just capture that pawn. Yeah. And we'll make another bad move here and see if you can figure out why it's a bad move.
Oh yeah, because I can take with my queen with no cost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Am I doing that, or are you?
Yeah. No. Yeah. Go ahead. I want to.
Okay. Cool.
Because this position was so bad for you that I feel like it wasn't a good like those pawns in the beginning were just like too strong. So I'm trying to like just kind of.
Well, we should have. Yeah.
So now I'm gonna go here, and we can just kind of play it out from here and see what happens.
Okay. So there.
But I mean, this is a good.
That limits my bishop moves. I mean, my rook moves.
Yes. But that pawn was already defended. I'm just kind of double protecting it. But you've done a good job with your pieces now, where like both of your rooks are exactly where they should be. There's only two, kind of files that they make sense to be on, and they're already on them. Your knights are very good in the center, and your queen's in a pretty nice spot attacking some things too. So you've really, done a good job getting those pieces to good squares.
Yeah, I would do something like pawn c6.
Okay.
To try to open up this middle so I can move the bishop up. The rook up.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. The other thing is you want to ask yourself, like, are there any undefended pieces that you're attacking? And I don't know if you notice any of those, but there's an opportunity.
Undefended of mine?
No,
or
mine,
yours?
Mine that you can take, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I can take this pawn. C4?
Yes. Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so usually, if you can just take a piece for free, that's probably a good thing to do. All right.
And it's in the center of the board, which is better.
Yeah.
I would do that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, at least you saved your queen.
That's
a good sign, yeah.
Nice cover. Oh, I could have attacked.
Yeah, you could have taken that pawn on d5 if you had wanted to. Uh-huh.
Now this is... What about rook d5?
Yep, that's a solid move, because now that pawn on c4 is no longer defending that one. So, yep, you can take that one.
Well, I can do this for free. Like queen take pawn.
Yeah.
A3.
That's what I was looking at. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep.
It doesn't seem so flashy.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be flashy. Like if you're taking free pieces, then that's a step in the right direction.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
But what I'm doing is just putting the rooks together so that they protect each other. And that's kind of a nice setup to have. If you take one, I can always take, with the other one.
Right.
And since you're ahead material, because you have the extra queen, if you have any opportunities to trade pieces, that would be a good thing for you. So you can always offer a trade if you're not sure like what to do.
Like something with these knights?
Yeah, like maybe one of the knights, like knight. I was thinking knight to d4 might be an idea. Just, if my knight takes you, your rook would take me, kind of thing.
Oh yeah. Or the same thing could happen with knight to d2. Yeah,
although knight to d2 is different because there's that bishop on f4 as well, so it's a double attack there.
Yeah. Let's try that.
All right, I'll play a tricky move and see if you can figure out what's going on here.
Yeah, I'm trying to
to defend the rook.
cover that rook with one of these knights, but it doesn't seem like that's really applicable. Oh, what about queen e7?
Queen e7. Yeah, queen e7 would be a good move. That would be a fine move, yeah. Because now if I take your rook, you can just take me.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is play another tricky move. And now the position is pretty complicated, I would say.
Yeah. Queen e6, save it?
Queen e6 looks like a pretty decent move. Yeah. Because you're getting,
because I wouldn't, it doesn't seem like I'd want to take one of your rooks.
Correct. That's right. If you take either of the rooks, you're going to be in trouble. So yeah, queen e6 would temporarily get out of the mess. Let's see if I can try. I'm going to try one more tricky move here on you.
I think I'd probably just trade, or I'd just take your knight. Yeah. Trade knights, essentially.
That
seems to be the only. Oh, and then I can push this queen to e5 to take the pawn.
Yep, that looks like a decent move.
Yeah.
So that probably is going to force me to. I'm going to play a bad move, but it's maybe a tricky move. So I'm going to play it and see if you can find what to do here. You have a really good move.
Is the move not just queen to e1?
Yeah, it is. I wasn't sure if you were going to be tempted to take the bishop, because if you take the bishop, then you get checkmated. When I take the rook. But yeah, that's it. Nice find. Yeah. So I mean, overall, I think you played pretty well. The biggest takeaway that I noticed was that when pieces are attacked, your instinct was kind of like, okay, the piece is going to have to move now, which is not necessarily true. There's always another not always, but a lot of times there's another option. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. But yeah, I mean, I think you play pretty well, I think.
Hey, thanks. I think you're being too nice.